So for the rule, I want to talk about traveling. You guys know what traveling is? So every team got called for basically one travel in the game, and there was a lot of traveling in the practice as well, right? So there's two situations for traveling, and that's what people really gets confused. Okay, there's one when you're moving, and there's one when you're basically still. Okay, like you're on a spot. Does that make sense? So when you're moving, you're allowed 2 steps. Okay, so from when you stop dribbling the ball, when you hold the ball, you get 1, 2, and then you can either jump, right? Or you can kind of like stay on the second foot, but the other foot can't come down for a 3rd step. Does that make sense? Yeah? And if you jump, you can't land. You have to actually get rid of the ball somehow, right? You have to shoot it or pass it. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, that's very simple, okay? But what you got to understand is, like, for example, I said that as soon as you hold the ball, right? So technically, if I'm still dribbling, before I catch the ball, I can sort of start my 1st step, and then I get another 2. I get kind of 3 steps, right? So James Harden in the NBA does stuff like that, where you kind of get 3 steps, yeah? But you got to understand, the ref is not necessarily going to be like, oh wow, that's technically 3 steps. No, it's just going to look weird to them, and they're going to call you a travel. Does that make sense? So there's a rule, and then there's someone who's blowing a whistle. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So even though you sometimes can get 3 steps if your 1st step started before you hold the ball, the ref is going to like maybe not notice that and just count you did 3 steps. Does that make sense? So the easiest way is just to be like 1, 2, lay up, yeah? Or 1, 2, pass. So the thing that confuses people is when you're standing still, you don't get 2 steps. So if you're holding the ball still and you do 1, 2, that's a travel. You understand? So you're only allowed to get 2 steps if you're moving. Does that make sense? So when you're standing still, you're basically allowed what's called a pivot. Does that make sense? So you're allowed to keep 1 foot still, and you're allowed to move the other one, okay? And that's actually quite helpful, because you can get all the way from here to sort of like here without moving that 1 foot. Does that make sense? And then you can find a good path, yeah? Okay? If you haven't dribbled yet, okay, you're allowed to lift up your pivot foot once you start your dribble. Does that make sense? So technically, starting your dribble is when the ball leaves your hand, right? But that's not as obvious as when the ball hits the ground. Does that make sense? So someone who starts their dribble, like it looks kind of like this. So no one's going to necessarily tell the difference between starting the dribble and not starting the dribble, right? But once the ball hits the ground, everyone knows you've started your dribble.